I told you we do not serve beggars here." The plate hit the floor with a crash, scattering steaming food across the tiles. Clara did not flinch. She stepped in front of the trembling old man, shielding him with her body as if her apron could block the shame. Rain pounded against the windows. The few remaining customers looked away, pretending they had not heard. She reached into her pocket. "Then take it out of my tips." But that was not enough. "You are fired. Get out." The next morning, just as the sun broke through the clouds, 200 soldiers in full uniform stood silently outside that same diner. They did not come for coffee, they came for her. Clara James was not the kind of woman people noticed. She did not try to be. At 32, she had grown used to living in the spaces between conversations, filling coffee cups, wiping counters, and offering quiet smiles that went unreturned. In a town like Ridgefield, Kentucky, where the factory had shut down and the paint on every storefront seemed to be peeling in slow motion, being invisible was less a choice than a survival skill. She wore her brown apron like armor, and her ponytail was always tied just tight enough to keep the weight of the day off her shoulders. Most mornings, she opened Billy's diner before the sun did. Most nights, she closed it long after the last regular had shuffled out. No one ever asked her why she worked double shifts. No one ever asked her much at all. But Clara had her reasons, and all of them traced back to a small apartment with a cracked kitchen window, a one-eyed tabby named Smokey, and a shoe box filled with war medals under her bed. She had been raised by her grandfather, Henry James, a Korean War veteran with a crooked back, a sharper tongue, and a heart soft as cornbread. He had stepped in when her parents vanished into their own storm of mistakes. And he had raised Clara on stories of discipline, dignity, and doing what is right even when no one claps for you. "Especially then, Clara," he used to say, puffing on his old pipe, "honor is not something loud. It is quiet, like sweeping the porch before the guests come, even if they never show." When he passed 3 years ago, the world lost one of its better listeners. Clara had not cried much at the funeral, not because she did not hurt, but because she knew he would have wanted her to hold strong. "Stand tall," he used to whisper, "even when you feel small." Since then, she had taken that strength and buried it deep. She worked the early shift and the late shift, took care of Smokey, and paid rent on time. Or at least she had until last month when her roommate lost her job, skipped out without warning, and left Clara with an overdue utility bill, half a lease, and a landlord with no patience. By the time she dragged her suitcase and a box of essentials to a rented room above an auto garage, Smokey meowed once, rubbed his scarred face against her calf, and curled up in a drawer lined with a kitchen towel. Clara stared at the ceiling that night, one hand resting on the cat's side, and promised herself she would make it through again. The new place was barely a step above a storage unit. One outlet sparked if she looked at it wrong. The bathroom faucet screamed like a banshee, and her savings, exactly $64.38 and falling, but she still got up at 5 a.m. and walked to the diner in the rain. She still smiled at customers who left change as tips, and she still brought Smokey a spoon of tuna from the breakroom stash whenever she could sneak it. People in town liked to say that Clara James was a quiet girl, but what they really meant was she did not ask for anything. She did not complain when someone spilled coffee on her shoes, did not flinch when the cook barked orders through a cloud of grease, did not argue when her paycheck came light and the manager told her to be grateful to have work at all. But what they did not see was that Clara noticed everything. She noticed which regulars looked lonelier after they finished their meal. She noticed when the new dishwasher had bruises he could not explain. And she especially noticed the ones who came in out of the rain asking only for water and never quite met her eyes. Her life was a patchwork of small kindnesses and invisible burdens, and she wore them all without complaint. Sometimes late at night, she would hold her grandfather's dog tags in one hand and Smokey in the other, and she would whisper, "We are okay. We are still okay." But the truth was, she was tired. Not just bone tired, but soul tired from all the pretending, all the swallowing of injustice, all the watching of the world while standing on the sidelines. She never asked for a miracle. She just hoped the roof would not leak again. And yet, on that one rainy evening, a Tuesday quiet as any other, when the door to the diner creaked open and a soaked, trembling man in an old military coat limped through, Clara did not see a stranger. She saw her grandfather, and in that moment, something shifted, not in the world, but inside her. The rain was coming down sideways by the time the door creaked open. Wind swept a burst of cold air through the diner, and every customer's head instinctively turned, if only for a moment. A man stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone. His coat, once military green, now hung in tatters, weighed down with water. A faded U.S. Army insignia barely clung to the sleeve. His beard was gray, patchy, unkempt. His left leg dragged slightly behind him, bandaged in layers of gauze that had seen better days. His hands, shaking as he removed a spring-knit cap, were covered in calluses, knuckles scarred and swollen. He held a small paper bag close to his chest like it was made of glass. Clara was behind the counter wiping a stubborn ketchup stain. She did not flinch. She saw the way he paused, uncertain, scanning the room, not for a table, but for permission to exist. Most of the other diners turned away, suddenly engrossed in their coffee or their phones. The waitress on shift before Clara had once said, "People like that do not want help, they want attention." Clara had never believed that. People like that, she thought, were usually just trying to be invisible. He shuffled to a booth in the far corner, quietly, respectfully. He did not sit, just stood beside it, one hand resting on the backrest as if needing its support. Clara walked over, towel still in hand, her apron already damp from her earlier shift. "Evening. Can I get you something warm?" The man did not look at her at first. His eyes were locked on the floor as though afraid his presence alone might get him thrown out. When he finally lifted his head, Clara caught the unmistakable glint of pain and pride fighting for space in the same tired gaze. "Just a cup of hot water, ma'am," he said softly. "And maybe if you have got a crust of bread that is headed for the trash." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of asking. Clara's breath caught in her chest. She had heard almost those exact words before from her grandfather, recounting the time a stranger fed him on a rainy night in Bussissin, 1952. She nodded once. "I will see what I can do." Back in the kitchen, a returned order sat under the heat lamp, chicken and dumplings untouched. She took it, carefully, plated it with extra buttered bread, and poured a fresh cup of black coffee. She slid it onto a tray with a small cloth napkin and walked back like it was the most normal thing in the world. "This was sent back just now," she said, placing it in front of him. "Still hot." He looked up, startled. "I cannot pay." She cut him off with a smile. "It is already paid for, and the coffee is on me." The man stared at the tray as if unsure whether to cry or run. Then slowly, he reached out and wrapped his fingers around the mug. "You remind me of my wife," he murmured. "She used to do things like this, said everyone deserved warmth, especially those who have lived through too much cold." Clara blinked hard, trying to keep her own tears at bay. From across the room, the diner's owner spotted them. His eyes narrowed, his mouth already forming the words that would echo louder than any storm outside. But in that moment, Clara was not thinking about rules or repercussions. She was thinking about the man in front of her, someone who had clearly fought for a country that now passed him by without a second glance. As he ate slowly and gratefully, he held his fork like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He chewed each bite like it was the first solid food in days. Clara noticed how he sat straight despite the pain in his leg. He did not complain, did not beg, did not blame. When he finished, he looked up with watery eyes and whispered, "You just saved a soul tonight, miss." Might have been broken, but not forgotten. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a rusted military dog tag. The chain frayed and dull. Pressing it into her palm, he said, "Name is Eli Turner. If I do not make it through this winter, I want someone to know I existed." And just like that, he stood and disappeared into the storm, his silhouette swallowed by the gray. Clara stood frozen, the tag warm in her hand despite the cold. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. Rent was still due. Smokey still needed food. The world still spun in its usual indifference. But something in her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had just done something that mattered. Even if no one else noticed, the sound of the front door slamming open broke the moment like glass. Clara barely turned before the voice came sharp, loud, and soaked in disgust. "What the hell do you think you were doing?" It was Wayne Becker, the diner's owner. His thick frame filled the kitchen doorway, his eyes locked on the empty plate in front of Eli Turner's now vacant seat. The steam from the finished meal still lingered in the air as if trying to defend her. Clara stood tall, the dog tag tucked safely in her apron pocket. "He was a veteran, sir," she said quietly. He asked for hot water and a crust of bread. I gave him food that was going to be thrown away. Wayne's voice rose louder this time, enough to make the handful of customers turn their heads, then quickly look away again. This is not a charity, Clara. I have told you before, if people see us feeding street trash for free, they will think we are a soup kitchen. A middle-aged couple in the corner went silent, stirring their coffee with exaggerated slowness. No one met her eyes. No one spoke. Clara inhaled deeply. I paid for the coffee. You can take it out of my tips. Wayne slammed his palm against the counter with a sound like a gunshot. I said no, he barked. You just made me look soft in front of customers. You do not get to decide how I run this place. Then came the final blow. You are fired right now. Pack your things and get out. His finger pointed to the door like a dagger. The diner grew colder in that moment. Not because of the rain outside, but because of what was missing inside. Decency, support. Anyone willing to say a word in her defense. Clara's hands trembled as she untied her apron. She was not surprised, not really. Disappointed, yes. Hurt absolutely, but surprised no. What stung worse than the shouting was the silence from everyone else. The woman in the corner leaned toward her husband and whispered, "That is what happens when you bring trouble inside." Someone else cleared their throat, shifted uncomfortably in their seat, and went back to reading the menu as if none of it mattered. No one stood up. No one said she was right. No one even thanked her. She walked out into the pouring rain. Her canvas shoes soaked through in seconds, hair flattened against her forehead. Her arms clutched her back, but her spine stayed straight just like her grandfather taught her. Outside, she stood under the awning, heart pounding. She did not cry. She could not afford to not hear, not now. A rustling sound caught her ear. From the alley beside the diner, the veteran appeared once more, hobbling toward her with effort. His breath was shallow, but his eyes still carried that quiet fire. "I saw what happened," he said. "I should not have let you pay a price for me." Clara shook her head. "You did not do anything wrong." He reached into his coat again and pressed something into her hand, his dog tag. "You just saved a shattered soul child," he said hoarsely. "You reminded me I was not invisible." Before she could speak, he turned and vanished again into the rain. That night, Clara sat in her tiny room, Smokey curled against her hip. Her wet clothes hung awkwardly over a chair. The only light came from the street lamp filtering through the blinds. On her cracked phone screen, she refreshed her bank account. 42 left, 12 hours. Rent was due in 10 days. She had no job, no health insurance, no backup plan. But she had something else. Courage. And strangely, in a world that had just rejected her, that felt like a kind of wealth. She picked up the dog tag, reading the name etched into its worn metal. Turner Eli J. serial number F472. The rest was faded, almost unreadable. She traced the letters with her thumb, wondering where he had served, what he had lost, and why this country, this town could so easily forget him. The next morning, her world shifted again. She did not even know a teenager had been filming until it hit the internet. A shaky, grainy video shot from across the diner showed Clara standing with quiet resolve, the owner's finger jabbing toward the door, his voice loud and ugly. By noon, it had spread like wildfire, but not in the way she expected. The comments were brutal. Rules are rules. She should have asked permission first. Bet this is not the first time she gave away food. Maybe she has been stealing. Her former co-workers unfriended her. One messaged her privately, always trying to be the hero. How is that working out now? Clara applied for jobs at 3 other diners that day. None even called her back. At one place, the manager looked at her, paused, and said gently, "We cannot risk the attention, honey. Nothing personal." Another did not even let her finish the application. They just slid it back to her and nodded toward the door. By sundown, she wandered through downtown, cold, damp, exhausted. The dog tag sat heavy in her coat pocket. She passed a bus shelter, and there curled up beneath a tattered plastic sheet was Eli Turner, trying to sleep with one arm covering his chest, and the other curled around that same paper bag. Clara knelt beside him, set down a small package wrapped in newspaper, half a sandwich all she had, and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." Then she turned and walked away, unaware that a black military vehicle had pulled up at the corner. Inside, a man in uniform watched her go and made a phone call. The rain stopped just before dawn. It left behind a town scrubbed in silence. The streets shimmered with thin puddles reflecting the first golden light that broke through the low-hanging clouds. Ridgefield's downtown was still asleep, storefronts, dark traffic lights blinking yellow in the air thick with the smell of wet pavement and something else. Anticipation. At exactly 6:45 a.m., the rumble began. Not from engines, not from footsteps, but from presence. One by one, black SUVs pulled into the narrow main street, forming a quiet procession that stopped in front of Billy's Diner. The first to step out was a man in a sharply pressed U.S. Army uniform, his chest lined with medals, shoulders squared like a man still carrying a battlefield on his back. He paused outside the diner's door and waited. And behind him, like an unfolding pageantry of discipline and reverence, they came. A line of soldiers, rows and rows of them dressed in full-service uniform, emerged from vehicles and side streets. Some were Army, some Marines, others Navy and Air Force. All stood in perfect formation along the diner's entrance, stretching down the block, silent and unmoving. No one had to be told to stop and look. Cars slowed. Pedestrians froze. Shopkeepers peered through their windows. In a town where nothing ever happened, this was something. Inside the diner, Wayne Becker had just finished restocking the napkin holders when the bell above the door jingled. He looked up and nearly dropped the glass he was holding. The uniformed officer stood tall in the doorway, eyes, hard expression unreadable. "I would like to speak to the owner," the man said. Wayne stepped forward, suddenly pale. "I am the owner." More people had filtered in from the street, now drawn by whispers and camera phones. The crowd outside was growing. The officer removed his cap. "My name is Colonel Matthew Turner, son of Eli Turner." Silence cracked like thunder. Wayne's mouth opened, but no words came. Colonel Turner continued, his voice calm, but commanding. "The man you humiliated here yesterday. He is the reason I am alive." The air thickened. Even the kitchen had gone still. In 2007, during my third deployment to Iraq, our convoy was ambushed. My transport was hit. 12 of us were trapped. Your beggar carried me 3 miles under enemy fire with shrapnel in his own leg. He refused treatment until we were all safe. He reached into his coat and pulled out a laminated citation. The Silver Star. This is his. Wayne's eyes darted around looking for someone, anyone to defend him. No one moved. He refused help for years. Turner said, voice cracking slightly. After my mother died, his PTSD got worse. He disappeared. We searched for months, and now, he said, stepping closer to the counter, we find him here. Fed and sheltered not by the system, not by the town, but by a waitress, one you fired. There were murmurs outside, phones capturing every word, hashtags already forming. Michael Rutherford earned medals most men only dream of. Turner continued, slipping into a steadier rhythm, but he told me once, medals do not feed the hungry. So he pawned this, his Silver Star, to buy food for a homeless family. He paused, then added, the waitress who stood up for him yesterday reminded me of the country he thought he had lost. At that cue, a young corporal stepped through the door holding a small black case. Inside the very medal Eli had pawned. Turner turned to the door. Bring her here. Clara had no idea what was happening until someone knocked on the door of her rented room above the garage. A local reporter, flushed and breathless, stood there with a camera crew behind her. They are asking for you, she said. The soldiers, the whole block is shut down. Colonel Turner, you have to come now. Clara thought she was still dreaming, but the crowd, the eyes, the uniforms, the salutes were very real. As she approached the diner, the line of soldiers parted slightly. Then at once they all raised their right hands to their foreheads. 200 soldiers saluting her, a waitress. Clara froze, her throat tightened, her breath caught in her chest. No one spoke. No one needed to. Colonel Turner stepped forward, presenting the medal. My father wanted you to have this. Clara shook her head, trembling. I cannot. It is not mine. Turner gently placed it in her hand. It is now. The fallout was swift. The diner closed the next day. Suppliers canceled orders. Staff resigned. Veterans groups picketed the front steps. Wayne Becker vanished from town in a matter of weeks. But Clara did not gloat, did not make statements, did not post on social media. She simply returned to doing what she did best, serving with quiet strength. Only now she had help. A veteran nonprofit offered her a full-time job managing a new community kitchen. The soldiers she had met that day, many came back to volunteer. The line outside her kitchen grew, but so did the warmth inside. And in the corner of her office sat a small wooden box. Inside it a folded flag, a silver star, and one tarnished dog tag that never left her pocket. It did not happen overnight. Justice never does. It creeps in slowly like morning light across a windowsill. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. The diner where Clara James once worked now sat dark and empty. Its open 24 hours neon sign had gone cold, and a sun bleached for least notice flapped behind the window. For years, it had served truckers, townsfolk, and tourists alike. But after that morning, the morning of the soldiers, it never served anyone again. Across town, something new had taken root. In an old warehouse that once stored broken vending machines, the lights now stayed on late into the night. Laughter echoed down the hallways. The smell of chilly cornbread and warm coffee drifted out through the doors. Clara stood at the heart of it all. The Ridgefield Community Kitchen, operated by a veteran-founded nonprofit, had offered Clara the role of manager within a week of the incident. She had not asked for it. She never chased attention. But people like Colonel Turner had made sure her story was heard, not for applause, but to remind the country what real courage looks like. On paper, Clara was now in charge of the kitchen. In truth, it felt more like a family than a job. Former soldiers peeled potatoes beside single mothers. High school volunteers ladled soup next to retired nurses. Smokey the cat, now a beloved fixture, watched over it all from a windowsill like a war-weary general with one good eye and a soft heart. But the most remarkable moment came 1 week after the salute that changed everything. It was just after 4 p.m. The kitchen was winding down for the day when the door creaked open and a small boy walked in no more than 7 or 8. He had sandy hair, oversized sneakers, and a serious expression. In one hand, he held a dollar bill folded carefully in thirds. In the other, a cookie wrapped in wax paper and tied with string. He walked straight to the counter and looked up at Clara. "I saw you in the video," he said. "My grandpa was a soldier, too. He used to help people, so I wanted to help someone, too." He placed the cookie and the dollar on the counter. Clara knelt beside him, hands on her knees, trying not to cry. "Can I use this to help someone else?" he asked. She did not speak for a long moment. She could not. Instead, she placed her hand over her heart the same way 200 soldiers had done days earlier, and gave him a quiet nod. No speech, no grand gesture, just one kind act echoing forward. Eli Turner, the veteran who started it all now, had a roof over his head and regular care at a nearby Veterans Affairs housing unit. Word spread that his son visited often. Sometimes younger soldiers came just to sit and listen to his stories. Stories not just about battles overseas, but quiet ones fought right here at home. Clara visited when she could. They did not say much. They did not have to. She still carried his dog tag, still kept the silver star in a simple box beside her bed. Some nights, she would run her fingers over its edges and whisper the words her grandfather once told her. Honor is not something loud. It is quiet. In time, people would move on. The story would fade from headlines. The video would scroll down the feed of yesterday's outrage. But those who had seen it, who had really seen it, would remember. Not because Clara stood up, but because she did so when it was hardest. Because she gave without expecting anything back. Because in a world that too often forgets its quiet heroes, she reminded everyone what dignity looks like when no one is clapping. In a world moving faster than most of us care to admit, it is easy to miss the quiet moments where real character is revealed. Clara James did not march. She did not protest. She did not post anything. All she did was offer a hot plate of food and a moment of respect to a man the world had already discarded. And somehow that was enough to shake an entire town. This story is not just about a waitress or a veteran. It is about us, about how we choose to treat people when we think no one is watching. It is about the value of decency without cameras, the cost of doing what is right when no one will recognize you for it. How many people have we ignored at the grocery store, the park bench, or even our own family dinner tables? How often do we let fear, policy, or pride speak louder than empathy? In today's America, where loneliness is rising and regard often feels like a lost art, Clara's story reminds us that honor is not always in a medal. Sometimes it is in a whisper, a coffee, a warm meal. We would love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment like Clara's? Have you ever stood up for someone when it was not easy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to act. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Here on our channel, we tell true-hearted stories for those who have not forgotten what dignity means. Because some heroes do not wear uniforms.